Master the business of speaking with your hosts, Taylor and Austin. You're listening to Technically Speaking.
Welcome to another episode of Technically Speaking. We're your hosts, Taylor and Austin, and in today's episode, we are talking about podcast guesting. Now, podcast guesting seems pretty simple, right? Like you show up on somebody else's show, you talk for a while, you share your expertise, and then you leave. Simple. Well, not so fast. If you are spending any amount of time podcast guesting, going on to other people's shows and sharing your expertise, you kind of want to do it strategically. So how do you qualify which shows to be on? How do you know when to say no? Are smaller audiences worse or better than larger audiences? And more importantly, how in the world do we turn podcast guesting into actual measurable ROI and get dollars in our hands from it? We have so many questions on this subject, and we personally at SpeakerFlow get asked about podcast guesting all the time and even help our clients connect their forms and lead magnets to their systems. But we're not experts in actually facilitating the dollars coming through the door. And so we decided to bring on an expert who is. And that expert is Christy Bilbrey. Now, Christy is a podcast PR agency owner and marketing strategist with a really strong background in PR and marketing for the US Senate, the White House, McKinsey Company, and so many others. And she knows what's possible when you use effective messaging as a marketing vehicle and you share it with the right audience. And she took that passion to help create this PR agency that helps her experts get booked on other people's shows to turn those guestings into dollars. So she's the perfect person to help us uncover all of our questions here today. Now, always stick around until the end for some awesome resources, and we hope you like this one. See you in there. Oh, and we are live. Welcome to the show, Christy. It is amazing to have you here today. I can't believe you decided to hang out with us for like a half hour.
Thank you so much for having me. I was like, it's a Friday afternoon. They seem like chill guys. Why not?
Why not? Yeah, well,
no, that's where I like to sit, right in the why not category,
Oh man, this is gonna be a good show. Okay, so Christy, you're from Arizona, right?
I am. We're in monsoon season right now.
Monsoon season. Oh, that is like some of our favorite weather. Austin and I don't know if you know this. We actually met in Arizona. We were both.
I did not. I know you live there. I didn't know you were both there. Oh, very cool. So you've experienced monsoons.
Oh, for sure. They're amazing. Best storms on the planet.
Yes.
Yeah. Funny side story. We moved to Arizona from Portland, my wife and I, right? Very drastically different climate.
Oh, yeah.
And so we're driving down, preparing ourselves for like the driest, hottest weather ever. We're like, oh my gosh, here we go. And we get here. It's actually right about this time of year. And the next day, just absolute downpour. And of course, because the ground is so dry, I guess, the water doesn't absorb very well. So you know this obviously, but people that don't live in Arizona might not know. The water just flows off the ground, like into the streets. And so it is shocking how much water it appears that there is, since it's not being absorbed into the ground very much. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of water in the beginning, but anyways, I felt like people lied to me. So
yeah, we actually do get rain. Believe it or not. Yeah.
It's awesome rain too.
True.
It's really cool thunderstorms.
Utah's actually drier than Arizona. Utah's the second driest state in the country behind Nevada, but everybody thinks Arizona is super dry, but I don't even think it's top 3. I think New Mexico might be drier than Arizona too. Yeah.
Wow, I didn't even know
that makes me feel a little bit better. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. Also, one of our favorite sandwich places in the world is in Arizona. So, Christy, I don't know if you like sandwiches or not, but Ike's Love and Sandwiches. Have you ever had that?
No.
Oh my goodness, are you serious?
Christy.
Okay. All right, I'll send you a link.
Taylor's got all the guys. Taylor has all the links.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, you got to get Ike's. And anybody listening who's in Arizona, comment. Let us know if you like Ike's. Best sandwich place on the planet. We dream about it. In fact, we were in Vegas. Was it Vegas, Austin? Yep. Yeah, I think it was for like an NSA conference. It was like maybe last summer. And we found it just in a gas station. Randomly, there was an Ike's sandwich place there. We lost our mind. It was the best day of our lives. So
what's your favorite sandwich there?
Oh God, Christy, there's like 150 of them on the menu.
It's crazy.
No joke.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mine is Chester the Cheetah, though, which is like an elevated grilled cheese. And it is unbelievable. I will say though, and Taylor, you may agree with this or maybe not, but the actual like internals of the sandwich, they're interesting and fun, which is cool. But the bread is by far the best part. It's like this perfect combo of crunchy on the outside, soft on the
Dutch bread. Yeah, that's crazy.
I'm
done with the show. I'm flying to Arizona. See you guys.
We need a food podcast, Austin. Yes. Holy crap! Just eat
Will you join us on that one, Christy?
Of course.
Sweet. Well, unfortunately, guys, we're not here to talk about sandwiches the entire time. I know that's why you tune into the show, but we are definitely excited to unpack this episode. Podcasting, using it as a marketing vehicle, getting revenue from it, branding and storytelling, and all of the things our listeners love and I would say need. So Christy, you have a ton of messaging experience. Like, your background is incredible. I'm excited to unpack some of that, but I guess like one of my like starting questions is like, how did you get into the world of podcasting from the messaging side of things? Like, how did that transition happen?
Needing to grow a business. I would say
okay.
That's where it really came from. So I started marketing strategy after I left corporate and politics. I had done so much marketing strategy. That's where I started. And, I went very quickly from thinking, oh, I have all this great background. Now I'm just going to pour into these small businesses. Easy peasy, right? This is going to be great. And then realizing, oh my gosh, I never learned how to market myself. This is totally a different ball game. And so that led me into the brand story world. And this is like, 7 years ago at this point. So learning everything I can about brand story just so that I can feel like I can connect with my audience and I don't have to be some sleazy salesperson or super pushy or whatever, just knowing that there is a space for me as a business owner and to be successful. But so I really did it for myself and then talked to other people. They wanted that. Great. So created an online course, created their stories for them. And then they said, okay, great. I have this story. I can put this in my content. Where else can I use this? How can I use this? I guess one of the big things was seeing so many people who have great content that they pour out to their audience, but they have a small audience. And despite so many people saying, all you have to do is have great content and the people will come, I saw that wasn't the case a lot of times. And so I found that really it's okay. You have poured a lot of work into this great content. Let's get it in front of other people and without necessarily spending ads. So what's an easy way to do that? Yeah, there's a ton of ways you can do that. But for especially a lot of the people I work with work from their home. So podcasts was an incredible vehicle, obviously coming from brand story. Podcasts are great because it's long form storytelling platform. I mean, it really lends itself to sharing stories with people to connect with new audiences, which is exactly what I was doing in brand story. So that's what really brought me there. And then, both on the end of creating my own podcast, the business that Story built, and then at the same time seeing, well, I also want to get in front of other audiences. And so I want to be on other podcasts. And then I just recommended it to all my clients before I even started doing it. I'm like, you just got to do this. You just got to add this to your marketing. And then I kind of realized, why don't I make it easier and help them do that? So that is a little bit of the circuitous path that led me here.
Wow. That's awesome.
You started with marketing expertise, obviously. And so you go out to do your own thing and realize, I need to figure out how to apply these principles to myself. Leads you to brand story. You realize podcasting is a great medium for that long form storytelling component. And then because of your own successes with that, you decide to help your clients do it, which eventually becomes an offering for you. Is that the story I just heard?
Perfectly said, Austin.
I love that. What's so great is that it's rooted in context, like so many, and Taylor and I both come from a marketing background as well. So I think I can say this pretty confidently, but there's a lot of tactics that people just throw out there. And a lot of people will just try them because they're the tropes. They're the things that we should be doing, i.e. dumping a bunch of money into paid ads or something like that. But really, I find that the best marketing tactics for each specific business are the ones that are contextualized into the foundation that they already have built. And so because of that, you're able to then make better results and the understanding of why it's important starts to matter a lot more. So that seems like a shining example of you starting a really successful marketing venture for yourself based on the scenario that you were in, not just because some random person was telling you to do so. So
Right.
I applaud
Yeah.
you for that. And I also can see why it's been successful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure. So one of the things that I guess I'm trying to like internalize the questions of our clients, because
Mhm.
we get a lot of these podcast related questions, and one of them is like, should I start my own show? Should I be a guest on shows? Like, do you have an answer to that question? Like, do you ever come across that in your clients, like the kind of differences between hosting your own show and guesting on a show, and pros and cons of each?
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like, for one, a lot of people don't have a ton of extra time. So, from a convenience and ease standpoint, purely,
Yeah.
that's a great reason to start guesting. Another is if you're contemplating your own show, the best place to learn what you like and don't is to go be on a bunch of
Yeah.
shows and see what other people are doing. You're like, I thought that was the approach, but I can see it's not going to play out in reality the way it was in my head, or, oh, I never would have thought of that. That's such a cool idea. So I think it's a great place to get inspired. It's a great place to hone your message and play around with different topics and maybe even tweak what you thought your niche was going to be for your podcast based on experiences that you have. I just feel like until you really throw yourself out there, then I feel like that's the best way to do it. If you don't already have a podcast, start with guesting. I would recommend doing 6 months, but I'd say at least 3 months. The reason I say 6 is because this is something I feel like isn't communicated enough with people who are curious, who I talk to about guesting is, okay, so how long does it take till I get results? This may be a question that you guys, would bring up
Hmm.
as well. So how long does it take till I get results? Well, this isn't just a tactic of me saying, I'm trying to make sales, but podcasting is really interesting. I know you guys definitely know this, but some podcasts will book you. I've had some where they're like, hey, somebody canceled. Can your client come on tomorrow? That's very unusual. Occasionally that will happen. But a lot of times when you successfully pitch a podcast, they'll say, wonderful, we want to have you as a guest. We can have you on in 2 months. And
That's
then
right.
not only that, but then it's like, okay, and then when is it going to be released? In another 2 months. So that means, okay, 4 months from the time that we got a yes. So I think just knowing that it can take time. There will be some who are like, great, we'll have you on next week and it'll be out the following week. That's awesome, but they are all over the map. So if you're going into this as a strategy, just keep in mind this is a long term strategy. It is worth it. And I'm sure we'll get into why it's worth it. But you have to remember this is something that takes time. So should you just guest for 3 months? Maybe not, because it's going to take a
Right.
while till you really see results and actually get to record a lot of those episodes. So I say, give yourself half a year to really play with it. This shouldn't be the only thing you're doing with your marketing, but I think it is really impactful, really effective. It just takes some time.
Oh man, I love that answer. And yeah, super. I mean, it's rooted in experience. Like, the game. It just takes time,
Yeah.
and at bats, the cool thing about guesting is you get to refine that
Mhm.
story and that brand message, and you see what resonates and what doesn't. And, before even considering to have your own show, like getting very clear on that direction, I think is really valuable.
Right.
Well, setting expectations is so important too. And like we live in a world where people want instantaneous
Instant,
results.
yeah.
And
Mhm.
so like the patience required,
Did we lose Austin's audio?
I think so.
Yeah, Austin, your audio just left.
hello,
There you
There
are.
we go.
you
Nice.
back?
Back. Yep.
Okay.
You cut it out like you know.
Do you remember where I was before that? Maybe if I can go like one sentence back, then cut it a
Yeah,
little
what
better.
was it?
You were just kind of starting in it when it cut.
Yeah, you were just like starting the sentence,
Okay,
basically.
I'm just
Like
going to
it
restart
was
that whole phrase.
okay. Great.
Okay. All right. So yeah, my point is like expectations are so important when you're going into something like this, because like the reality is that, and I think for our listeners, brief technical glitch there, but where I was going with my sentence before my audio cut out was that podcasting is not that different from blogging, and that if we put out a blog today, first of all, it's going to take a little while for Google to index it and even know that it's there at all, let alone for Google to see it as an authoritative enough blog to start ranking it higher and higher up in Google. So a blog you post today may not even actualize in Google's algorithms for another 6 to 12 months. And so you're writing content for the here and now for what is sort of hope, but strategic hope that Google gives us what we want out of that blog later on. And same deal for podcast. Even if we record it today and it publishes tomorrow, it might take a little bit of time for the audience to go listen to it and to internalize it to a point where they may want to take action to reach out. And so it's just, this is, at least from my perspective, a longer haul move than, say, picking up the phone and making cold calls. And so I think why I'm pointing this out is that the expectations going into that will give somebody the patience to do it for long enough and consistently enough to actually then see the benefits on the tail end. Maybe you agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people should, that's just great. Another way of saying, don't think there's anything wrong with you or that you're doing it wrong because you're not getting these instant results. It's just not the way it typically happens. I have had kind of a freak occurrence where I was on a show and it published pretty quickly. And a couple weeks later, I got the cold email saying, "Hey, I just heard you on this guy's show. Can we set up a call?" That's, I don't like to say that that's the norm. Yes, it can happen. It's not the norm, but I don't want to be totally doom and gloom that it's like, don't expect anything for 12 months. You will get more opportunities. You'll have people start to find you to speak, on other shows who say, "Hey, I heard you here. I'd love to have you on this," or maybe speaking in person. It opens up a lot of doors in the meantime while momentum is building. So there's, I think that gives people a little bit of hope in the journey as it happens. And I probably didn't answer the other half of Taylor's question, which was, how does this compare with having your own podcast? And I think the interesting thing, because you guys know, it takes years to build an audience as a podcaster, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. However, a lot of podcasters, as you know, like to be on other podcasts as well. So it's a very symbiotic relationship. It's not that I would necessarily say pick one, which path do you go down? A lot of times it's which one are you going to start with? I would say start with guesting. If you love it, then yeah, maybe it is something that you consider having your own show. But even if you have your own show, you're going to want to be on other shows as well as a guest. And a lot of times you'll see, just like we're doing here, I had Taylor on my show. I'm on his show. You see a lot of overlap. I'm like, "Ooh, I love that topic. You need to come on here." It's a great community. So once you get in and you're going to start getting a lot of ideas, whether that's ideas of other topics you want to do on other shows or ideas you might have for your own show. So they're not exclusive to one another. They play very well together.
For sure. No, I like it. It's kind of like a roadmap, just start with guesting. And if you feel like you want to go down the full blown have your own show route, go do it. And you'll get all those at bats in the meantime.
Right.
One thing that's popped up for me as we've been talking is like, how do you successfully vet a show to be on? Like, do you appear anywhere that someone's willing to have you and just get your swings in? Or do you need to be strategic in the shows that you're picking? And if so, like how? Like, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think to a degree, I think you don't want to be overly so. I'll kind of share, I guess, the good and the bad. I feel like you need to have some strategy going in. Yes, there's a lot of experimentation that happens where you're refining your message and playing around with things, but you should have a pretty good idea. What's my goal with this? I think that's a good place to start. A lot of people, it's credibility, it's lead generation, it's thought leadership. It's kind of a combination of things because the more shows you're on, you're going to get all these links on Google. And so people who Google you, which this is another reason to do it. If somebody finds out about you from a friend or they see you somewhere, they're going to Google you probably. And then if you have all these links popping up, then it's like, "Oh, wow, this person's in demand." Well, what are you in demand for? Because you want to make sure that you are approaching this from the standpoint of, what do you want to build? What do you want to be known for? And so there's some different ways you can approach this. Yes, obviously it's okay. Take me, for example, PR, marketing, podcasting, brand story. Those are, a few different topics that I can easily speak to. But then it's also knowing who is your ideal buyer. And so a lot of the clients who come to me, a lot of people in my audience are women over 40. Okay. So that opens it up a little bit more. Some people, you have to really think about the perspective of your audience, who you're trying to get in touch with, because are they going to podcast to learn? Probably somewhat. Are they going to just, you know, relax and unwind and have fun? Well, what other podcasts might they be listening to where if you totally put all your eggs in one basket with, I am only doing marketing shows. Okay, well, how much of your audience are you missing by thinking about, like, okay, I'm also a Christian woman business owner. There are some that are just that, or, some that are just with interests that you think, is this something that comes up a lot for my buyer persona? So some of that is kind of going into demographics of like, who is your audience? What do they like? What are different topics? I have a client who she was previously a lawyer. She's an executive coach now. Okay, great. So we put her on legal shows. We put her on shows about mindset and leadership and that. Well, she's also done a lot of great things with investing that kind of play a part in what she does with her clients. So we've also been pitching her to personal finance shows, which you might not necessarily think about from, executive coaching. But for her background, it just happens to work. And we know that a lot of the people who listen to those can fit into her category of women executives. So I think it's really just taking a good look at what do you have to offer holistically that can tie into your core message. And that's where you should go. But should you just go to anyone? No, I think even though you might think, well, you're just clicking a button to log in and spend 30 minutes. Well, okay, but that's still 30 minutes of your time. You still have to promote it. You still prepare for it. So no, I don't think you should just go into anywhere. And then when okay, this is kind of these are my core topics. Now I want to research shows within that area. Which shows within that area should I consider? So I'll tell you,
Right.
what I look at is, for one thing, is it still a current show? That matters because, as you guys
Yeah.
know, there's so many podcasts out there that, may have been done for a year or two. And so they're still showing up in results for like, what's the top show for whatever, because that's the beauty of podcasting SEO. It does last for years, but you don't want to waste time pitching shows that, hey, they're not even current. Do they have guests? There's a lot of shows that might seem, oh, this is perfect, I want to pitch them. Well, they don't accept guests. They're just a solo show. That's all they do. Okay, so those aren't good. Do they have a little bit of sticking power? So, like, do they only have 4 episodes? Because we don't really know if they're going to be around tomorrow. So, make sure
Right.
they have ideally, they have some reviews, not that they have to have millions, but like, does anybody have any kind of feedback on them? Are they promoting this in any way? So those are a few things. And then, just taking a look at their topics. So just kind of skimming through, what are the episode titles? Are any of those does it seem like the host is looking for topics that you can speak to? Because as a podcaster, which is really the perspective that I take with my guests when it comes to pitching, is what irritates me about people who pitch me, that I'm like, I'm not even responding to this one because, um and when you think about what makes a good pitch, it's personalized, right? So there's so many people who might just see, oh, she has a marketing show. My client, he does marketing too, so I'm just going to throw him in there. Well, okay, but the business that story built, like, what's the tie to my show? Did you look at any of my episodes? Did you listen to anything? Do you see a tie? And the other thing is, you have to realize that podcasters get pitched a lot, especially if they have more than 4 episodes. If they have some
Yeah, they
staying
do.
power, they're getting pitched a lot. So, how do you make your stand out? Like, you need to remove any guesswork. You need to say, yes, here's their background. here is where they'd be perfect for your show. Like, here's the tie-in from what they do to what you do, so that that podcaster can just quickly and easily say, oh yeah, that's a no-brainer. We want them. So I think just taking any extra work away from the podcaster. If you think your show is a perfect fit, then you need to spell that out and say exactly why.
Yeah.
For sure. We can speak to this personally. It is so annoying getting pitched. You're like, did you even listen to the show? Like, geez.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yes.
Yep. We've even had emails come in where they're not even addressed to a person, but to just technically speaking as if it's its own entity. And we're like, okay, we're humans back here. So remember that, please.
Right.
There's so much valuable stuff there. So thank you for
Right.
unpacking that.
Yeah.
We kind of touched on both the hosting versus guesting and what shows to be on, and also started getting into like what you can do to sort of make your podcast guesting as effective as possible from the perspective of getting on shows. And I want to go a little deeper into that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to double a little bit back just to kind of close the loop on like which shows to be a part of too, because I think the second most common question that we get behind should I be on anything or something specific is how much does audience size matter?
Mm-hmm.
And I have some like assumptions about this. So for instance, if you have a smaller audience, that audience may be a lot more engaged and a lot more willing to take whatever's being said on the show seriously, since they obviously care enough to be one of the few followers, but also you don't get as much exposure. So the law of averages may not work to your benefit quite as much. So what's your perspective on the size of the listenership for a specific podcast before you go guest on it?
I think it doesn't matter as much as some people may think. I think there's value to small, to medium, and to large. So I think a lot of people will say, if you were asked to speak at a retreat where there's not 500 people in the room, there might be 30 people in the room. But like you said, they're very engaged. They really care about this topic. They might be more qualified leads for what you do. Does that mean that you're going to? So you wouldn't want to turn that down, just like you also wouldn't want to turn down speaking to 500 or 1,000 or 10,000 people. Like, they can both make sense. Whereas, like you said, if you're speaking to 10,000 people, there's probably going to be fewer people who really care, because they might be there for just it's a big name, like it's a big name podcaster, so they are not necessarily as focused on like super niche, unless that person, that podcaster, like that is just what they do. So I think there's value in all of it. So I don't recommend, I think if, as long as it's a solid podcast, they put out good content, and your audience is there and they care about the topics that you speak about, I think it's worthwhile. So yeah, I mean, I pitch my clients across the board. There's some that are small, some that are medium, some that are large. I think more than anything, it's where are you a good fit? Like, which shows do you connect with regardless of size? And you don't know what they're going to be like down the road. And this is, these links do last for years. And so it can be helpful for you. Part of it is a numbers game. You are trying to probably to improve your credibility and authority. You want to be seen as like, wow, this person is everywhere on this topic. Everybody wants them on their show or speaking in front of their audience. But yeah, of course, you want to pitch big opportunities and you want to pitch small. So I don't discriminate as much that way if it's a really solid show that I think could be a good fit for my client.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Wow. Amen. I totally agree with that. Yeah. Thanks for breaking that down. Okay. So here's another one for you. So I think you mentioned this earlier, like you want to have an outcome in mind of your podcast guesting or even running your own show, but let's stick to kind of the guesting realm here. Mm-hmm. I think what a lot of people are looking for, especially from maybe a PR perspective, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here, by the way, but things like lead generation, turning it into revenue, like I think those are some of the outcomes that people are thinking of right away. Like, what's my ROI on my time doing all of this, basically? Now, we've touched on this a little bit. It can take time, right? There's the long haul play, 6 months, a year. Like, you got to be consistent with it more than anything. But let's say somebody's on a show. What's the best way to move their audience that you're in front of into your own and turn that into revenue? Like, should people have call to actions at the end of every show, or is it just a matter of showing up and, letting people know you exist? Like, how passive or active should the process be of getting a show's guests to become your own audience?
Well, I think the essence of PR in general is really having an opportunity to take control of your messaging. It's just like I had some clients who were previously on the news. They were newscasters for a long time, and they spoke on my podcast and about how to be a better interviewee, right? So how can you be a better podcast guest speaker? And this is something we talked about. It was like, well, what if the person whose show you're on, you think the question is totally obvious and you're expecting it and they never get to it, and you're like, shoot, that's what was going to kind of drive people to me, and they're not going there. And you
Mm,
just have to remember, when you're a guest, yes, you're not the one who's necessarily asking the questions, but you need to go into interviews knowing what is it that's important to you to communicate, and finding a way to work that into conversations. So podcasters are all over the map. Some will say, a lot of them are really great about saying, what are your links? We want to promote you. Where do you want to send people? And others they're like, I don't want to be pushy with my audience. I just want to keep it very conversational. So you have to think about, okay, I don't totally know if they are going to let me say, I have 10 tips to grow your business as a podcast guest, go there. Or if they're just going to say, look her up online, or here's her Instagram handle. But you, in your answers, can say, this is what I do for clients. This is my experience. And you can find a way to say, okay, here's what this audience seems like they would be a goldmine for in terms of my business. So, how can I make sure that my answers incorporate those pieces that are going to make people curious, show them that I have something that could be helpful for them, even if the only opportunity I have is for them to Google my name after the show. So I think it's just kind of being prepared for the worst, but also knowing, hey, a lot of shows are going to let you have have a freebie, or have something that you can promote to drive people. And so I think it's important to be prepared for both. Best case scenario, yeah, have something that this is specifically, I wouldn't say go in super broad, like, oh, I do all kinds of things for all kinds of people. Have a goal, have a CTA in mind with, this is really what I want to drive people to. So I'm going to make sure that my messaging and my answers are really focused on that.
Yeah.
man.
I
Great.
mean, like, hindsight being what it is, but I'm thinking, like, of course, you just have to be prepared for both
Based on
situations,
the
because
show. Yeah, for sure.
sometimes they're going to tee it up and make it really easy for you, and sometimes you might have to get a little creative to let people know that you're open for business. Which, fair enough, that's kind of the nature of being in business. Um, so to build on that just a little bit, let's imagine a scenario where the podcast host is willing for you to make a small pitch at the end. Go download my freebie or whatever it may be. Do you make recommendations for your clients as to what type of call to action tends to be the stickiest in terms of actually getting leads from it? Or do you find that there's not a perfect answer?
Well, I think everybody's different in what they have. I think having a freebie, if is great. If you have a path that is specific to what you're offering, that can be great. And I think the easier you make it, if it's sign up for my free masterclass, that's still fine. But obviously people know, oh, that's going to be an hour of my time, whatever. Even an ebook, it's kind of like, I would say the easiest way is, if you have a one pager, or you have something short that's, maybe later you can interest them in bigger things. But I think something where it's like, oh, that's just a quick, easy thing for me. The easier, the better, instead of, it doesn't have to be what you've put your blood, sweat, and tears into building some enormous thing. A lot of people don't have time for that. They're just like, oh, I really like what she said. What's something quick that I can just keep at the ready? And I feel like people are more likely to go for that if they don't know anything about you before investing more. And I'm just talking about time. I'm not even talking about
Yeah.
money.
Oh,
Wow,
man.
I love that answer for so many reasons. We Austin and I talk about micro conversions all the time, like just about getting one small yes at a time. You don't need to, you're not marrying anybody yet. Just, small steps, baby steps, So
Yeah.
that was the perfect answer, Christy. This has been a lot of fun and really valuable. You can tell you're an expert at exactly what you do. So thanks for coming on and sharing your wisdom. Speaking of making it easy to pitch stuff at the end, what are you working on right now that our listeners can benefit from?
Well, definitely, I recommend they check out the Business at Storybuilt podcast. And if you do have any interest or curiosity in podcast guest speaking, then I do have 10 tips to grow your business with podcast guest speaking that I know Taylor was kind enough to say they are going to include in the show notes. So
we'll think about it.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. No, for sure. They're in the show notes, guys. They're there. Austin will make me put them there. I know. It's Friday. You know what I mean? All right. Well, guys, if you like this episode, don't forget to rate it, like it, subscribe to it. And if you want more awesome resources like this, go to speakerflow.com/resources.
Bye, everyone.
See ya.
Yay.
Thanks for tuning in today. Check the show notes for more info and see you next time. Later.